Broadcasting live from Park Avenue in New York City. Brought to you by Global Wealth Office at Nest Seekers International and Classique Moderne. I am Loy Carlos. Welcome to today's episode of Peace and Good Wealth. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Colin. Good afternoon, Perry. Pretty exciting day today. We are recording our first podcast for Peace and Good Wealth. And I think the best way to start out the podcast is to explain to our viewers how we came up with the title for the podcast, which is Peace and Good Wealth, and how we define it. So I'll just go ahead and really read the intention behind the meaning of Peace and Good Wealth. So Peace and Good Wealth refers to the idea of having both inner tranquility and financial stability, essentially living a life where you are not only free from stress and conflict, but also have sufficient resources to meet your needs and live comfortably, implying a balanced and fulfilling existence. And there are three key points to this phrase. One is your inner peace is prioritized. That's achieving a sense of inner peace, which can be more valuable for overall well-being. The other one, of course, is financial security, which is what wealth signifies. That's having enough money to cover your basic needs and live without financial worries. And the last one is the holistic approach to happiness, which is that true happiness comes from a combination of not just financial stability, but also mental and spiritual serenity. I think that encompasses not only what the podcast means to us, but what really Global Wealth and Classique Moderne stand for. Incredibly excited today to launch our very first podcast with a very, very special person to me. Originally from Richmond, Virginia, our special guest has spent 2/3 of his life performing. He was on the national tour of Hairspray and has delighted off-Broadway audiences in a variety of shows, including Naked Boys Singing and Icons. He is a freelance TV casting producer and has worked on over 35 unscripted shows, including Big Brother, The Amazing Race, and America's Got Talent. He has worked with all networks, including CBS, NBC, ABC, Fox, Discovery, Amazon, Food Network, etc. And last but not the least, he is also senior editor of arts and entertainment at Classique Moderne. Please welcome my very good friend, Ryan Obermeier. Well, welcome, Ryan, to our very first podcast of Peace and Good Wealth. I'm so happy that I always call you as the first. I remember calling you when I was thinking of doing the magazine. I'm like, you're going to be an editor. Did the same thing with it.
Listen, you got to start with, I'm the benchmark, right? So you start off great.
We actually had a really, that first, do you remember who was the first model that we had? She actually really got us all started.
Yeah.
She was fantastic. She was fabulous. And then we also had, Joe Iconis, in the magazine as well, thanks to you. Joe is has so much, has had so much success, on Broadway and off Broadway as well. But let's talk about you, for a second. You are based.
Favorite topic.
Mine too. So you're based in LA. So let's talk about LA for a second. The fires are still going, as far as I can tell, right? How much of it has already been contained? I mean, are we? The thing about the media is like, you would think that this would be like the big news until it's gone, but it really, I struggle to find, coverage for it. I guess because the algorithms just don't allow me to see all of the news. Maybe that's one thing, or maybe it's just also because it's overwhelmed with other things that are I guess to the media, it's really much more important, like, who sings in Trump's inauguration.
Right. I mean,
So,
very important issues.
yeah, exactly. So let's talk about LA. Where are we now? How are you? How are you in relation to where everything else and where everything is going?
Yeah, so right now there's the two main fires. There's the Eaton fire, which I think it's definitely more contained. I think it's about 55% contained today. And then there's the Palisades fire, the first. I think the Palisades was first, or maybe it was. Yeah. Anyway, that's still only 22% contained. I'm sort of right in the middle. I'm in the San Fernando Valley, right in the middle of both of those. So as they're progressing and kind of getting closer, we're sitting in the middle of both of them, and other little fires were popping up. There was one that popped up in the Hollywood Hills, one that popped up, which is south of us, one that popped up north of us. So we're literally sitting here watching the fires just kind of come and get closer and closer and closer. Luckily, the winds have died down. That was the biggest issue with the fires from the get-go, was that the Santa Ana winds were just blowing everything, and they were blowing embers up to like 2 miles away and starting other fires. So while you think you're safe and you're fine, if you're up to 2 miles away, you're still, at risk.
Right.
So anyway, the winds have died down. So that was like the biggest issue for us. We just want to make sure that it's coming. So right now we're sitting fine, but the problem really is the air quality for us. Air quality is horrible. They say don't go outside without masks on. We really have been stuck in our homes since they started. So that's the issue right now. The biggest issue for us.
And also, the funny part is, it's not so funny part is, for a while there, I think everybody, even outside of those areas, had all of their possession in their cars just ready to go at any given point in time, waiting for that evacuation notification at a moment's notice. And how much of your possessions could you possibly put in one car? You would have to really sift through a lot of different things, which is kind of a hard decision to begin with, as it is. And then the other part of that, I've heard, is exactly what you were talking about, which is, I think Simon Sinek was the one that said this. When the wind blows away from you, it's blowing towards somebody else. Right? So, you can't really feel good about the fact that it's blowing away from you when it's, blowing towards somebody else, and vice versa. Right. And the fires are also not selective, because a lot of people have talked about, this really isn't our problem. It's a multimillionaire problem. It's a liberal problem. It's a California problem. But not everybody is a multimillionaire, and even multimillionaires also. Some of them are underinsured or not insured as well. Right.
Exactly.
So, and I think also the people, have not factored in the fact that there are workers that rely on these houses, to begin with. How is, you're doing casting. How, has it affected the business at all? Peter's also, does auditions, right? Video auditions. So, how has that affected you guys?
Yeah. So for my husband, Peter, that does self-tapes for actors, he has not really been affected, I will say. For me, the business has been slow anyway. So like it's it's an ebb and flow with Hollywood, whether it's a strike going on or there's strikes all over, right? Or there's negotiations for tax cuts for filming here, filming somewhere else. So it's just, again, it's an ebb and flow with my industry in general. So I haven't really noticed much of a change. That being said, I'm still waiting for a show to start. So which I wrapped a show right before the holidays. So now I'm just kind of waiting for something to come back. So I, again, haven't noticed much of a difference. I will say that, everybody is affected by these fires. Everyone, kind of what you were mentioning, the millionaires. It starts with the millionaires, right? Because think about the location, right? So it is where they live, the Pacific Palisades. It's affecting their homes, whatnot. But as to your point, the workers that are in their homes, the
landscapers and maids,
the housekeepers and whatnot, they are affected because they have nowhere to go to work now, and so it trickles down, right? And even to the point of animals, wildlife, entire ecosystems are affected by this because they have nowhere to go either.
Exactly,
So
and also
yeah,
rebuilding. If you think about rebuilding, right? Part of the beauty of a place is the topography of the place, right? You're building, in a house. Let's say even if at best circumstance, it was really quick rebuilding your house, but you don't have a neighborhood. Your neighbors are not there. The restaurants are burnt down, right? The libraries are burnt down. All of these, little shopping places are burnt down that are rooted in that community. Churches, also have burnt down.
yeah,
So it's not just, the person who lives there every, maybe, as a pied a terre, as one of 4 properties that they own, but the people, and, we're also forgetting the people who had the houses because they inherited it from somebody, from a grandmother, right? Where they can't afford to build a $10 million house because it wasn't $10 million when their grandparents had it, right? So I think that's sort of the what's lost. What I find really perplexing is that we have been pitted so badly against each other that segments of populations can't relate to or empathize with something that's not within their immediate sphere. From people from North Carolina, when they were, when they had those floods, people didn't think that people empathize with them. You've got fires here. People didn't think that are empathizing with them for whatever reason. It's always like, okay, if it doesn't affect me directly, it's not really my issue. But it really is, it really is an issue. California is one of the biggest economies in the world, and so what affects it affects all of us in the U.S. I remember. Can you imagine a pandemic without entertainment? Right, when we're all in lockdown.
yeah. Exactly. Which is why you didn't have so many movies coming out for so long.
Yeah.
That first, and then the strikes for however long those lasted. The writer strike, the actor strike, the SAG strike. So you're with these lulls of no entertainment, and you're like, okay, well, why is AMC putting out? Why are we watching Pretty Woman in the theaters again?
Yeah,
It's because
exactly.
there's no new entertainment coming.
Right. So I think what we need are really people who are looking to build bridges, between communities. I think that's really important. I'm going to the World Economic Forum in Davos specifically for that because every region of the world will be represented there, with the hope that we are all looking towards like sort of building a future, together, whether it's AI, whether it's environment, sustainability, et cetera, or just, financially, economically, being able to work with each other so that everybody sort of benefits from it, not just like one area or one region or one country in the world. You are doing something very exciting, which is you have a new show on YouTube called Tripping.
Trip it or skip it.
Okay, Trip It or Skip It.
Skip it. My YouTube channel is called Tripping with Ryan, but the series is really called Trip It or Skip It, where I go to these small towns that I'll just pick. I will randomly pick on a map. Now there is criteria I'll go over with you, but I will just pick it on Google Maps and be like, I want to go there and see what this town's all about and see if it's worth a trip. But that's the general gist of it. Like you said, I'm just kind of trying to connect communities.
So let's go back. Let's go to how. Let's say you see a town. You come across a town, and you're thinking, well, this seems interesting. Tell me, what are you looking for?
Yeah. So first and foremost, the idea behind it was small towns that are within 2 to 2.5 hours ish of a large city. So it can be a day trip. That is like number one. Because primarily I've lived in cities all my life, right? So New York to Los Angeles, I know the need to get out, right? So maybe you're not in New York or Los Angeles, but you are in another large city. So thinking about day trips to just get out and see other places and disconnect from the hustle and bustle of the city you're in. So that's first and foremost. It needs to be within driving distance of a day trip. My second criteria was I wanted a small town feel. So the towns that I've reviewed so far have been roughly 2,500 population,
Wow.
but I'll go up to 10,000. It's really about the feel of the town.
Mm-hmm.
And my other criteria is that I need there to be a downtown, like a central location to kind of start and explore out from there.
Mm-hmm.
So because some towns don't have downtowns where, you just kind of got to figure out where you are. There needs to kind of be a central hub. So that's kind of my criteria for deciding on where I want to go.
So there's always going to be some sort of like a main street where everything is in a town square. Very Hallmark of you.
I watched too many Hallmark movies and I was like, I gotta find this town.
Yeah, so do I. You haven't met somebody yet that made you like, screw the city life and,
everybody I meet, I'm like, screw this city life.
Yeah.
I want to get out of here.
So, what are the tell me some interesting things you've seen so far in this small towns. What's the main difference? Let's start with this. Culturally, every region, every town is different from the other, right? And part of understanding each other is understanding the context of where you live. That's a great thing about travel, right? Whether you're traveling in upstate New York where there's 5 restaurants versus like a city like New York where there are hundreds of restaurants, etc. Right? There's always the context of that neighborhood. What are you seeing? Because even in California, right? Just going outside of the main cities, it's different.
Yeah.
How does it? Is there a pattern there? Obviously, life is, I would hope, slightly slower outside of them. But what other things are you noticing that we, especially New Yorkers, like me, we barely even see each other when we're walking down the streets.
Right.
So what are you? What is it like walking, in the downtown of a small town?
So it's interesting that you say that because a city, and you can attest to this, living in New York or any other large city, it can very oftentimes be a lonely place because, like you said, sometimes you don't even see people. So the biggest thing, and full disclosure, I've only done a couple cities, so I'm getting this off the ground now, and I'm just starting it. But as I get into more, I'll understand the different cities. But it can oftentimes be lonely in these large cities, and yes, your friends are here, but they're far away and they're busy in their lives and whatnot. In a small town, because there's not that many people, I do find that people are more friendly and more eager to talk to you. If you're an outsider, they really want to know what's going on with you. So the bartenders are more friendly because they're not necessarily an actor that's trying to get into your next movie, or they're not influencers or whatnot. So I oftentimes find that people are just more friendly. That is the number one thing, maybe because they are more at peace. They are running on a slower pace and they are taking times for themselves as well, So they're enjoying their day at the same time while you're just walking by them. And I get a lot more smiles in small towns. I get a lot more hellos and how are you today, and really caring how I am today versus like, oh.
Just moving on after they ask you how you are. It took me a long time to figure out why New Yorkers do that. How are you? But in the moment you respond, they're gone. They've just walked.
And listen, New Yorkers aren't bad people. New Yorkers are not bad people. They're just busy.
No, exactly.
I lived there for almost a decade, so like I get it.
And I think what people don't understand is like New York, as big of a city, it is. And there are millions of people. We also sometimes act like a small town, right? Especially when tragedy happens. We all kind of like band together because we've been able to kind of like stop and breathe for a little bit. Most of the time, what people consider as rudeness or arrogance is really us just trying to get somewhere because we have to, right, in order to survive in New York City. What's a surprising thing you might say? I'll tell you, for instance, you go to Mexico and almost every block had a 7-Eleven, right? It was very surprising, to me. You go to Milan and there's like 5 guys right in front of you, as well. What are surprising things that one might find in a small town that you wouldn't have thought, it has to be there or was there?
Well, it's interesting. Most of the small towns don't have chains, so that's something interesting.
Mhm.
Like you don't get the subways, you don't get the things that are everywhere because they don't allow it. It's same. I know you've been to P Town. It's kind of the same thing. They don't allow chains in that town, so
Mhm.
you're like, that's interesting. Um, so again, because I've only been to a
Yeah.
couple so far, my most recent trip was to Arkansas. Um, just I don't know. It's a lot of the traditional things you might think of, like the gas stations or
Right.
the Buckeyes or
Right.
whatever. You're like, oh, I've heard of this, but
Well,
I've never actually
so
seen it.
no Wawas. You know.
No, I didn't even eat Wawas. I know Wawa. Being from the East Coast, the Sheets Wawa debate, which one's better?
Yeah.
But no Wawas yet.
So, well, I think that's true because if you in a provincetown, it's a very good example. If you wanted a burger, it isn't you had a couple of choices. That's pretty much it, right?
Burger Queen,
Yeah, exactly.
because you don't have Burger King, so they had to make Burger.
Very queen. So,
Which is now gone.
what other you've been? I think the last one was it the last one that you had. You went to haunted house. So, tell me about
Yes,
that
I actually went
experience.
to. Don't downplay it, Loy. I did not go to a haunted house. I went to the most haunted hotel in America called the Crescent Hotel. Um, and again, before going here, before planning my trip here, I didn't know it was there. But through doing my research, because I do have such a short amount of time
Mm.
there, um, I discovered that there was this place called the Crescent Hotel. I looked into the history. I did all this research before I went. Um, and then I did a paranormal investigation at midnight. It was really interesting. It was really fun. I'm all about trying new things and seeing what it's all about. I did freak myself out before I went, but it's okay. I had a good time. I lived to tell the tale. Yeah, I left the spirits at the hotel as they asked me to.
Yeah, but that's the other thing too. What I find very interesting is that a lot of these towns are very, very spiritually grounded. That there is more of that. Like in New York City, there are like haunted tours, right, all over, but you don't really feel it as such an important factor in our lives because it's there are more important things that are happening. But in small towns, and these are important places, and they take it very seriously. It's not a
Very serious.
yeah. So
I mean, I think I had in this town of 2,200 or 25, whatever the population was. I think I had an option for like 8 different ghost tours because 8 different places had hauntings and all this stuff. So it was a major draw for the city.
wow, that's really remarkable. Through your travels, I would think that part of it is also to be able to allow people. It used to be that we did everything by TV, right? It's just all broadcast, but also to be able to have people relate to. I mean, there are probably a million influencers going to Rome, to France, to the biggest cities, showing you all of these very luxurious hotels that no one, most people won't be able to afford. And that's all great and wonderful for them. I think this gives a different twist to that because it really opens it up to people who may not have all that much wherewithal to be able to go somewhere, neither the time nor the the financial wherewithal to do so, right?
Yeah.
And it's interestingly, if it's within a couple of hours, it would I think what would be interesting is to find out how different or how similar they are from someone who's just only a couple of hours away,
Mhm.
right?
Very much so, because one of the cities I did here, which was about 2 hours from Los Angeles, was Idlewild, California. And Idlewild was like a different world. So it was a little mountain town I had no idea about. And it was a different world. I mean, a perfect day trip. You could do it from Palm Springs, which was about an hour drive, that's actually where I stayed. I
Mm.
stayed in Palm Springs. I traveled up from Los Angeles 2 hours, and then I explored the town because it was a day trip, and then I stayed in Palm Springs. So yeah, completely different. And you're an hour, 2 hours from this major metropolis.
And And then which brings us back to the very first thing, where when we talk about California, it's you're talking, people think seem to think that it's all Hollywood, right? But California is such a huge state, and with just a couple of hours from these main areas that we know, people are very different from each other, so you can't lump everyone in one into one category, in one group of people. What other things do you have planned?
Yeah, so I am actually heading to New Mexico in week and a half, 2 weeks, week and a half, to explore a town there. I'm not going to tell you what it is yet, but it's a town that I'm excited. Again, Google Maps. I do a little bit of research. I try to find the criteria with a downtown and a population size that I'm looking for, and I go and I see what it's all about, because I'm going to these. I got some a recommendation from a friend, like, you should reach out to to sort of curb the expense of these trips, which they are expensive, because I do have to fly and stay for a couple nights, and so they can be expensive. But to curb the expense of these trips, my friend was like, you should reach out to this hotel or this restaurant or whatever if you want to go there. And I'm like, yeah, but then if I go there, I feel like the review might be biased. I want to go to these places with fresh eyes and on my own dime, and see what it's really about, because I don't want to feel like I'm giving someone a good review if they gave me a crappy product.
Right. That's the sort of like what we were also sort of encountering at Classique, right? When you want to do a review and you want to do all of these things, or you want to feature someone, you want it to be a real feature, or, a real review. And the more relationships you build with other people, unfortunately, the harder it is to do that, because it influences what happens.
Exactly.
So it's almost better off when you're going in cold and you don't know anyone, you don't know anything. You can know them afterwards, but not before. Because how are you supposed to, if they're so nice to you but their service was terrible? How are you supposed to kind of juggle that? It's
Feel bad.
Yeah, exactly.
Feel bad.
Especially in a small town, it could kill an entire business in a small town.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
peace and goodwill.
I will say one of the other interesting things too about kind of vlogging, or doing these reviews of these towns, is I'm not an influencer. I don't consider myself an influencer. I literally just started this as a creative outlet, something fun for me to do, and check these towns out. It's much harder when you live in a city like New York or like LA, where everybody's on their cameras or whatever, and everybody thinks they're somebody, which is fine. When you go to a smaller town, I feel a lot more relaxed, and I feel a lot more comfortable doing it. People are more inquisitive, but they're not maybe as judgmental as someone might be in a larger city, because everybody else does it.
Right. Because it's also, they could be curious about, what it is and what the process is. It's kind of cool. But also when there are hundreds, if not thousands of influencers traipsing through your place day in and day out. I mean, I know that in Italy, it's like after a while, you can't blame them for being annoyed, because they're literally like 20 people right in front of your building, posing, and it's not pleasant, right? You don't get to enjoy it. The first one probably was really cool for them, and then the rest of it is just it's too much, right? You don't get that sort of privacy. But I'm glad that you're doing it. I think that partly because creatively you want to do it also, and we talked about this a lot, that there are two things, right? With peace and good wealth, you can't have peace without financial stability, and financial stability doesn't bring you peace, right? You could have as much money as although I would love to try, to test this, but you can have as much money as you possibly can.
I want to test it too.
Right?
Let's test it. Please, let's test that.
But some people who have all of the money in the world, feel lonely, right? They still feel unfulfilled because it's not everything, right? Health for instance is very important. Having family, friends, and support is also Very important. So, does Peter go with you to all of these places, or do you go by yourself?
I go by myself.
Wow, that's crazy.
I know. I want to see. I don't want to be on anybody else's timeline. I don't want to care about what someone else thinks about something. I really want my opinions to shine through in these videos. And so, no, I do all of this by myself. It's my passion project. He stays home and he works. Someone has to do the working.
That's right.
While I'm out venturing into the unknown U.S.
And there goes the good wealth, right? So,
good wealth is gone.
Yeah,
any wealth is gone.
Right. So, well, with that, thank you for coming. Thank you for being our very first guest at Peace and Good Wealth.
But wait, we're done? Come on. I want to talk more. I told you my favorite topic is myself.
That's right.
What do you ask me more questions?
Well, unfortunately, though, the other questions and the other conversation we'll have probably won't be able to be aired. A lot of them are probably going to be censored, as you know. But we're gonna have. I'm gonna have you a lot because we have a lot of things to talk about. Not only because of your trips, but moving forward with Classique, which we're trying to launch within the first quarter, relaunch within the first quarter of this year. As well, have more people, and also once I think the air clears, no pun intended, in LA. I'd love to be able to do more of these episodes with you, and we can talk about other things as things normalize, in the area. But
hopefully sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for coming. Thank you for being my very first guest, and good luck to your not just your channel, but also your show, but also hopefully you're going to give us something really juicy on your next episode.
We'll see.
Can't wait to see it.
Good luck with your new podcast.
Thank you so much. Take care. And that ends today's episode. Thanks again, Ryan Obermeier, on behalf of Global Wealth Office at Nest Seekers and Classique Modern. This is Loy Carlos wishing you peace and good wealth.